There is no meditation app, rebound sex, or gratitude journal that is going to help you that much, especially in the early phases of healing. It might distract you for a minute, but it's not going to help you dig in there. I think one of the greatest gifts and one of the greatest impediments for most survivors of narcissistic abuse, bizarrely enough, is empathy. It's a gift because empathy is good. It fosters social connections. It's good for the empathy haver. It's good for the empathy getter. It's good. Sadly, with the mess the world's in today, empathy, which is so desperately needed, it also places people at risk for toxic relationships because the toxic people take advantage. They take advantage of the empathy, they capitalize on it, but even despite that, empathy is good. Like I said, until it becomes a risk. One thing we know about narcissism, and it's a tough pill to swallow, is that a goodly chunk of folks with narcissistic personalities, they themselves didn't always have easy backstories. Narcissistic personalities are sometimes a result of early developmental environments characterized by chaos, trauma, abuse, neglect, disruptions in attachment. It's messy, right? Some have argued that the narcissistic personality may simply be a post-traumatic presentation. In some, but obviously not all cases, this may be true. However, we also know that a decent subset of folks with narcissistic personalities were also simply raised to be a-holes, deeply indulgent and entitled parents, every one of their whims engaged, their parents protecting them from any discomfort in their lives, getting lots of stuff, lots of you're the best and there's nobody better than you and isn't my kid so special. But even in those cases, because a lot of kids these days do grow up like this, it's usually the combination of the overindulged kid who still has parents who are only interested in them when it works for them or it's Instagrammable. And these parents are often nowhere to be found when the child needs something other than a new car or a photo op. Every single narcissistic client I have worked with in therapy, and I've worked with quite a few in the years I've been doing this, had, I have to say, some form of problematic, crappy backstory. But the fact is, most of us do. And I empathize with it. I really did. But I also didn't feel, and I let them know this, that it didn't let them off the hook for their terrible behavior in present time. I'd hear things like, I cheated on my wife, but that's because my dad cheated on my mom. Honestly, that stuff didn't fly in my therapy room. It may have helped us understand the why, but it doesn't erase the harm created by their behavior, the need for the accountability of their behavior, and the fact that justifying it doesn't help the person they harmed feel whole. So, for many survivors, a central part of the whole trauma-bonded carousel is justification. They don't mean it. Maybe it's me. They had lots of trauma. It's not their fault. And over time, the survivor keeps justifying and self-blaming and feeling smaller every day. That is the dance of narcissistic or antagonistic abuse. The fallout is anxiety, sadness, self-blame, shame, rumination, and confusion. You know the drill. However, a trend, and it kind of is a trend, people on social media justifying the bad public behavior of a celebrity, people shaming folks who use narcissism as a frame to understand chronic bad behavior, therapists suggesting that perhaps we need to have empathy for the other person's backstory, survivors who are just being empathic and simply wanting to understand the why. Is that in all that why seeking, survivors unwittingly become enablers. We hear things like, they didn't mean it, they need help. Yeah, they do, but they're never willing to get it. Or they had a tough backstory, they're stressed, on and on. Honestly, it is kind and compassionate to understand that person's behavior in that way. And it's also dangerous. Why do I say this? Because many people who do all of this empathy-laden justification run the risk of shaming the people who raise the narcissistic abuse they're going through. They'll say things like, oh, your mother is like that because this happened to her. Your fiance may be like that because that happened to him. I understand why your father is that way. And when people hear that, they feel silenced by that, as though they have no right to talk about the harm they're experiencing in the relationship. It's what I call toxic-splaining. It's a riff on mansplaining. It's all about the why and explaining narcissistic behavior. And let's hold space for them rather than letting the survivor share their own story and their own experience without being shamed and silenced. Listen, enabling is never okay. And frankly, I really can't. I can't drop a dime on the narcissistic people for the reason that the world is the hot, toxic mess that it is. We needed the enablers as well to keep giving them oxygen. I know that survivors never set out to be enablers, but in the midst of their pain, of not wanting to lose their compassion and empathy, there's a risk that they may fear that I'm going to fall into the abyss of becoming a cold, unempathic person. I'm going to lose my own empathy. So they try so hard to understand the why of the narcissistic folks and find compassion for them that they lose all compassion for themselves. And I get that. I really do get it. Because I feel lots of compassion. Believe it or not, you won't believe me saying this. I do feel a lot of compassion for people who have narcissistic personalities. It's a terrible way to have to go through life. To always feel insecure and threatened and uneasy and victimized and uncomfortable and to feel like nothing is enough. To be narcissistic is to always feel hungry. It's not good. And I feel a tremendous amount of pity for people who have these personalities because they miss out on all of the truly good stuff in life. They seek it out in a sports car or a fancy house or sex or drugs or rock and roll. And then they miss the joy of a new flower in a garden, or having fun just doing errands with someone you love, or playing with a pet, or playing the same game of chutes and ladders over and over with kids in your life. It sucks to miss out on this. Every time in my life I've shared a simple joy with a narcissistic person, they either sneered or regarded me with contempt. And while my heart ached for them and all they were going to miss, I would typically cut bait. It ain't my job to be their happiness coach. And what sucks more is watching people have the life get sucked out of them because they basically have the sense that they're not enough for the narcissistic person, and no amount of compassion, no amount of empathy that we show a narcissistic person will change that. So the question becomes, how do we maintain our empathy without becoming enabling? We have to recognize that it's hard for them, but don't attempt to justify their behavior. We have to stop giving so many second chances. We must remember to never toxic-splain while a person is sharing their painful story of narcissistic abuse or a relationship. You can acknowledge their origins, but give yourself permission to set boundaries or disengage, regardless of how difficult someone's backstory was. You can recognize the challenges of their story, but not roll up or suggest that someone else roll up for their abuse. That's the key. Compassionately acknowledging their experience and then keep on walking. Now, that's not the story that antagonistic, toxic, or narcissistic people like. They want you to acknowledge their pain, and they want to use that as a get-out-of-jail-free card to keep behaving badly. And everyone's saying, oh, they're going through something, attachment issues, tough backstory, enabling story, you know the drill. They don't need to be accountable, and that basically means that some people will forever have to take the role of being a psychological punching bag because for some reason we don't expect people with these personality styles to step up. Keep your empathy, please. The world desperately needs it. Understand their backstory. That's fine to do because that's part of empathy. Give yourself and others permission to disengage from toxic situations, because that is empathy too. We are in a world that appears to be polarized into either woo-woo, can't we all get along, or emotional abuse. It's time all of us started charting a course for the middle. Let's talk a little bit about cognitive reframing, shall we? I was sort of in and on the fringes of a conversation the other day. I wasn't in it. I was just sort of, like I said, on the periphery. And the people were talking about money, which I have to say, other than politics and religion, may be the most fraught issue that any of us can take on in a group. And this group was talking about people who go to school for a really long time, like law school, med school, grad school, that kind of thing, and take out loans. But they were talking about a profession where people would do this and then not make that much money afterwards. Or it was the nature of the jobs that you get with this graduate degrees. It takes a long time to make money. And the overall gist of what was being discussed, as I could hear it, is that we have to be more open with talking about money and teach students in high school and college and graduate school more about financial literacy. I agree with that. I actually don't think we tell most people how money works, how interest works, that money is a long game, all the things, right? That conversation up to that point seemed like a reasonable thing. And I kind of started tuning out until I heard some people piping in and saying, we have no right to complain about our incomes. All these people did the same thing. We have no right to complain about our incomes because other people are financially struggling. I kind of cocked my head sideways and said, wait, what? The person who was originally talking was talking about being underpaid. And this person was clearly underpaid, right? And someone else was minimizing this person's experience of being underpaid by basically saying, hey, someone has it worse than you. The person whose income was lower than it should be, again, was highly educated. These are all people with graduate degrees, and was actually getting a bad deal. And my guess was going to need to find a different job. It was just the nature of the place that this person worked. And the person who was pushing back was basically saying, hey, someone who has less education than you also makes less money than you, so you have to stop complaining. I was like, what? You're not even complaining. It's not even apples and oranges. It's like apples and buffaloes. Like, you're not even complaining anything in closely the same thing. So this unfortunate person who was underpaid, despite having literally multiple graduate degrees, you could see on their face, they felt bad. And then other people in the conversation said, well, maybe we should all feel bad about how much money we're making. Well, I didn't feel bad about that. And I was like, what? I had a sort of don't engage Ramani moment then, and I shook my head. Listen, folks, someone is always going to have it worse than you, and a lot of people are going to have it better. If you don't make enough money, there's still someone who makes less. If you went through a loss, there's someone out there who lost a lot more. If you experienced a trauma, someone's had a worse one. You got 7 billion people on the planet. There's always going to be someone who's got it worse. That doesn't mean that what you went through doesn't suck. It's a gaslight, right? Well, your nurse isn't that bad. But it was painful to watch one person share actually something quite vulnerable and real, and then watch it sort of be shut down with, well, you shouldn't say anything because other people have it worse. Other people who didn't devote the same amount of time into education and all this other stuff, and this person did. This led to another person in this conversation. Don't ask me why I didn't get up and leave. I could not escape, right? To say, well, I agree. Well, let's think about all of the financial issues y'all are having and let's cognitively reframe it, which is a fancy way of saying, let's think differently about your insufficient salaries despite the amount of time you put in and that you can't really pay your bills. There's no way to think differently about it. Let's start by letting them know that many of the people in this conversation were getting screwed by their employers and that they either need to ask for more money or leave. And also that it sucks to not be recognized for your work. Because I don't know what world the cognitive reframers lived in, but rent, mortgage, cars, heat, food, where I live, it all costs money. I'm someone, like I said, and I've been very clear on this channel, I'm going through some stuff now. A surgery from which I'm having a rather complicated recovery. I have another freaking surgery looming. And I had the loss of one of the people to whom I was most close in the world. And every single freaking time Someone tried to brightside me for the past several months. They keep saying, it will get better. She is in a better place. You will feel better soon. This will be behind you before you know it. In the future, things will be better. Or they'll say to me, let me tell you, I know someone who had a worse story than yours. Or you are so lucky that you loved your mom. Or you're lucky that you didn't die in surgery. That was one of my personal favorites. Really? So I have a problem with cognitive reframing, which is a way to attempt to change how you feel by focusing on thoughts instead of feelings, on thoughts rather than our bodies, on thoughts rather than depth. And this is something that happens to survivors all the time. They get it from friends, family, therapists, pastors, Instagram life coaches, Instagram posts, social media. Just think differently about it. Reframe it. Someone has it worse than you. And so survivors hear shit like, well, at least he doesn't hit you. At least you still have a mother. At least you have children. At least you have bread in your fridge. What? And you know this as a survivor. You are already blaming and questioning yourself, wondering if you're making too big a deal of it. You ask yourself, okay, maybe this is just what relationships are. Maybe I'm not, maybe I'm expecting something unrealistic. Maybe I'm the entitled narcissistic one. Maybe, because after all, other people have it worse than me. Most survivors who get stuck in narcissistic relationships, y'all are cognitive reframer experts. You have tried to reframe your mess about 1 million times. Listen, are there some survivors out there that get stuck into loops for a long time? Yep. And my approach there is to validate that what happened or is happening is real. And what's happening in the relationship is real. It's not okay. And to help ungaslight them so they can make a decision about the relationship that works for them. Now, if after all that, weeks, months, years, and they still can't see it clearly and can't break out of the loop, then I would actually really highly recommend, especially after a few months, that they do much more intensive trauma-informed work. But for many survivors, we keep trying to push the cognitive reframe before we give them the validation. It doesn't work that way. Knowing and being reassured and being told that you aren't seeing it wrong, that you are not crazy, that you are not unreasonable, or actually hearing that what is happening is not okay, that's actually often enough for people to say, oh my gosh, thank you. I feel better. Thank you. You feel more solidly in your body and your mind. You trust yourself a tiny bit more, even if nothing's changing. All of that stuff, the manipulation, the invalidation, the gaslighting, the betrayal, it all still sucks. But to just get validated not only helps you get soothed and calmed, you learn a little bit more about the geography of the relationship. And once that happens, once you really get it, if you want to reframe, then reframe. But you have to reframe from a realistic place, such as, okay, now that I know he's not going to change, but the custody fight is just not something I can afford or endure right now, I'm going to reframe for now and put my focus on the kids. I'm no longer going to think about the misery of this relationship. I'm no longer going to keep thinking about pleasing this unpleasable spouse. Or the reframe may become, I know, because this is why parents triangulate, they're going to pit me and my sister against each other. So let me get on the same page as my sister so they can't divide and conquer, and be prepared for when they do it. And if I can't do that, or she won't get on the same page as me, then I need to disengage. It becomes a reframe. But reframing it as, well, at least I'm in a relationship, at least I have a sister, nah. Asking survivors of toxic and narcissistic relationships to reframe in the sense of, well, it's not that bad. Everyone has bad days. Or find things to be grateful for in your narcissistic relationship is actually simply harming them again. And yet people do it all the time. When I was sitting there on the periphery and listening to that conversation, and I watched this reframe sort of train wreck happen in front of me in real time, shutting down real people who are frustrated with having gone into so much debt and studying so hard to not be valued financially. It really made me think about all the survivors who have had similar experiences in their relationships when other people weighed in. And to everyone out there who's listening and like, oh, cognitive reframes are great. Great. Keep reframing. You do you. But let me give you the suggestion. Validate a person's experience first before you push for the reframe. And to those of you who are constantly being encouraged to reframe your abusive situation, remind yourself that this cognitive reframing play allows those people telling you to reframe, it allows them to stay in their comfortable little bubbles and shut your pain down. Most survivors of toxic relationships are elite reframers. No one does it better than you. But until you're validated, it doesn't do a damn thing to ease your pain. Silencing your own pain to make other people more comfortable with their own lives is not cool, and it will slow down your healing. And when people ask that from you, it can be confusing and magnify your pain. So let the reframers stick their reframing where the sun don't shine, and then they can reframe that if they want. So needless to say, and I've talked about it on this channel before, I am not a fan of this idea of manifesting and anything in the manifestation neighborhood. It becomes a way of blaming people for their misfortunes too often, and for others to feel falsely safe because they are manifesting better than other people, thus taking responsibility for really what's basically luck in some cases. And then it's assumed that the person who has something bad just didn't manifest correctly. It's New Age prattle, as far as I'm concerned, from where I'm sitting. And I have rarely seen it do any good, except with a handful of lucky people. But I have, at least in the world of narcissistic relationships, seen it do harm. And the way we treat survivors of narcissistic or other abusive relationships is where, like I said, it does the most harm. Apparently, and this manifesting stuff relates to this concept of attraction, that you energetically attract stuff to you, which I guess sounds really good when life is going your way, but becomes very much about blame and shame and complicity when a person is in a harmful circumstance, such as a narcissistic relationship. There's a sort of cold dismissiveness to taking this position. What are you manifesting? Perhaps you attracted this. Are you kidding me? And I've seen firsthand this question of, what are you manifesting to attract this to you? The harm that this does to survivors, especially those who may have believed in this discourse about manifesting and attraction and actually held themselves responsible for years in their relationship and just scrunched up their faces, I guess, and just tried to manifest more or better. And when the narcissistic person kept being narcissistic, they would keep filing it under or facing it as, what is it in me that is attracting this? How about nothing? How about that it's your bad luck that you are within shouting distance of this narcissistic person, or your bad luck that you were born to them or work for them or whatever it may be. My drive and commitment to doing this work on narcissistic abuse is basically that I am sick and tired of toxic relationships being simplified to just a two to tango paradigm. And on top of that, when we talk about toxic relationships, we actually get more lost in the inner workings of the narcissist, the bully, the perpetrator, the causer of the harm, than we do in understanding the dynamics of these relationships, what happens to people in these relationships, and why people get stuck. A lot of why people get stuck is the messaging from the world at large. They get asked, what is your part in this? Did you set a boundary? Did you communicate clearly? Well, what about their trauma? Is there a way you could think differently about this? Rather than saying, yo, this other person's behavior is a pattern, it's not healthy, and nothing you do or say is going to change it. And their personality is not going to change, so their behavior is not going to change, and make your decisions accordingly. The whole, what about you is attracting this? It really makes me feel sick every time I read it or hear about it or it's even said to me. Because honestly, in a narcissistic relationship, the so-called thing in the person or energy that is attracting this, frankly, at best, is wrong place, wrong time, bad luck, perhaps not knowing fully what narcissism is, and perhaps having had a history of prior narcissistic relationships or trauma that undercut being able to see yourself clearly. But none of that is the core issue. The real issue is that the narcissistic person's behavior in a relationship is unacceptable. You can spend all day understanding their why they do what they do, but when you bring it back around, you're in the same place. They're behaving in a way that's simply not okay, and it's hurting you. It's less about energetic attraction than it is about a clear understanding of what is acceptable. You aren't attracting this. You are simply in the unfortunate position of being in this relationship. Which, of course, goes back to the often cited issue of, well, then just leave. If it's so bad, then just get out of the relationship. I mean, would that it were that simple. You know the simple reasons people don't leave: post-separation abuse, harassment, kids, money, custody, family court, culture, stigma, lack of social support. And when people don't leave, because leaving may often unleash a whole nother set of problems, they are also blamed for being part of the problem and not actually making a choice. It's not really a choice, because all you're really doing is choosing between bad and bad. That doesn't feel like a choice. Turning to manifesting and attraction as life approaches carries the danger of playing on people's sense of helplessness, powerlessness, and hopelessness in life and relationship situations. And for this reason, you can see how survivors of narcissistic relationships or people in narcissistic relationships for a long time may be vulnerable to believing that all this manifesting stuff can bring some real wisdom. Anyone watching this video and who has been through a narcissistic relationship, y'all could write a book on helplessness. Nothing you do works. Nothing you say works. You feel like you're a researcher trying to figure out exactly how to predict the narcissistic person's behavior, perhaps in hopes of getting ahead of it or anticipating it, or maybe even changing it. You try it all. Talk more, you talk less, you put it in an email, you do couples therapy, family therapy, your own therapy. You keep the house clean, you make more money, you lose weight, you give in to whatever they want, you keep your mouth shut, you do what they demand you do for a living, you give up friends, you give up on other relationships like family relationships, but nothing works. You keep, no matter what you do, you keep getting gaslighted and emotionally abused, and yet you also feel the decent moments in the relationship and recognize that it's not as simple as, well, this is a mean person, but rather a person where you still feel good feelings and want that to last. So in the midst of this, thinking that you could take this into your own hands by manifesting and focusing on attracting the healthy love you deserve or whatever it may be, could be a way to take back a sense of control in what otherwise feels like an unfixable and painful situation where there is no way to really change it. Listen, if a person finds that manifesting is what works for them, then you do you. But please do not fall into the discourse of, well, she's in this unhealthy relationship because that's what she's attracting, and she has to work on that. No, no, and no. Put the focus where it belongs, which is the unhealthy person's unhealthy behavior, which is often interlinked with a few moments here and there that feel normal and good, and may be happening in a person that is often quite engaging and charming and valued by others and does well in the world. It makes it confusing and difficult because of all of that to keep a focus on just the unhealthy behaviors, which are the ones that are causing all the harm. When I read this idea of, well, maybe she attracted the abuse nonsense, I recognize that even when a person really commits to healing from a narcissistic relationship, that the challenge becomes shutting down the foolishness of the world and some of this toxically positive New Age nonsense. No, you did not attract this. You may have gotten stuck because of old demons, but did you pull it forth from the universe? No, that's not how this works. Instead of all this attraction talk, the focus really needs to be on awareness and education, on seeing it and getting it and recognizing that when the human need for attachment comes up against intermittent abuse, nobody has a fighting chance. And that compassion for how difficult these relationships are and reality about how difficult leaving can be, that's the path forward. Not magical thinking, but uncomfortable radical acceptance. You may find that even as you're going through this process and whatever that looks like for you, you may find that there are people out there trying to micromanage your healing. What does that look like? Well, let me give you a few examples. Your serial cheater, narcissistic partner is finally out of your life, and the trauma bonding makes coping with this very difficult. So your friends tell you that you just need to get distracted and go out dancing or go to Vegas and meet someone for a rebound. Another scenario would be your narcissistic mother makes a big, like a colossal deal out of you forgetting her birthday. But her birthday happened to fall on a day you were preoccupied with a very important job interview. And now she's giving you the silent treatment. And a family member tells you that you would be coping better if you could just forgive her and write in your gratitude journal. Or your narcissistic boss and colleague sort of come together and triangulate and steal credit for something you had worked on for months, and they do it in front of your company's CEO or leader. And that leader, CEO person believes them. So you watch them get promoted and get a special award while you spend your days ruminating at the disaster that this job is and how much time you've wasted. And then your friend rolls up with a meditation app telling you that if you meditated 30 minutes a day, that you'd feel better. I am sure all of you have your stories of how people kind of try to get in there and help you dealing with this or healing from this. And when you're deep in it, managing hurt, rumination, betrayal, confusion, heartbreak, and you just need a minute, or you're trying to take it slow with your healing and learning about narcissism and perhaps edging closer towards radical acceptance. Here's the thing, folks. There is no meditation app, rebound sex, or gratitude journal that is going to help you that much, especially in the early phases of healing. Might distract you for a minute, but it's not going to help you dig in there. Healing from narcissistic abuse is not the same as healing from a normal broken heart. A normal broken heart with one, you grow apart from someone, you find out maybe they aren't as into you as you were into them. They decide to go back to an ex. But there may not have been any antagonism and manipulation and gaslighting and all that other stuff that does such a psychological number on you. But rather, it's the stuff of love, right? Love's complicated. Bad timing, different feelings, unrequited love, but our hearts still hurt. Comparing a normal broken heart to the heartache of the narcissistic abuse is like comparing a paper cut to a severed limb. The pain is not only far different, so too are the long-term ramifications. Healing from a regular broken heart, it hurts. It hurts. But it has a more normal course. Tears, time, distraction within 6 to 8 weeks. Some people may even find that they were a little grateful for the experience and slowly move on. Nobody is grateful for the experience of a narcissistic relationship. And no, this is not a 6 to 8 week thing. Time helps, there's no doubt about that. But these relationships change you internally. They sap trust. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust the world. It means taking back your entire sense of self, to figure out what reality is again, to stop doubting yourself, to slowly come out of a world of hypervigilance, a world of being constantly on edge, of wondering when the other shoe is going to drop. And these impacts, especially, for example, it was a parent that was narcissistic, they send echoes into your lifetime. This is no ordinary broken heart. So that means that someone giving you a gift basket of essential oils and a journal and some tea, while absolutely lovely, I'd love to get something like that, is not going to cut it, though, when it comes to healing. And in fact, when you get that kind of help, the gift basket or the meditation app, you may even feel crazier, because you may wonder, maybe I'm making too big a deal out of this, because they're telling me the lavender oil and primrose tea should work, and I feel as though I've completely lost my mind and my sense of anything. But you may also find folks micromanaging or mismanaging your healing even more, giving advice that may not account for narcissism. For example, weighing in about forgiveness or telling you that you just need to think differently. There is also the danger of being told that you need to get out of that relationship and meet people quickly. Nah. After a narcissistic relationship to heal, you need time away from that. Coming back into your authentic self, or even discovering your authentic self, can only be done with lots of solitude thrown in, and not while you are trying to figure out how to please and win over a new partner. The micromanaging of your healing may also look like people sort of putting you on a schedule, saying things to you like, hey, it's been 6 weeks, maybe you do need to see a doctor, that's too long. Now listen, if you can afford therapy, it's always great in these circumstances, but that's not about too long. 6 weeks, you're not even going to make a dent in this. Healing takes lots of time. The longer the relationship, the longer the healing takes, because the more seismically the narcissistic abuse has affected your life. Not everyone gets this. Not everyone understands narcissistic relationships. Listen, on a channel like this, all of you watching, all of you commenting, I know many of you do. And I kind of wish you all knew each other, because my guess is that you would not be micromanaging each other's healings. But a lot of people out there don't get this. They don't understand this. They haven't been through it. They're in denial. They don't see it. They don't get it. They don't want to get it, because it's a sucky thing to get. It sucks to realize this about human beings and relationships. And don't get me wrong, these micromanagers are not on a collision course to hurt you. They often just hate to see your pain, and they feel helpless. They aren't just busybodies, but the micromanaging always runs the risk of leaving you feeling like there is something wrong with you, and that is not a good feeling. They give you advice, they want you to heal faster, to put that narcissistic relationship behind you. It's just not that easy. This gets even more magnified when it's a family or a parental relationship. You often aren't breaking up, and the other stakeholders, friends of the family, other family members, will often want nice and tidy forgiveness, apologies, compromises, and they'll want to micromanage all of that, often with the goal of keeping you locked into the narcissistic relationship with the family member. And they may do nice things, like getting you gifts, or talking to you, or taking you to dinner. That might be the nice things they do to help you. But they may also do manipulative things, like telling you how hard your narcissistic parents' lives were, for example, and asking you to look for the good things in your abusive sibling. Always remember, healing from narcissistic abuse isn't normal healing. To heal from a narcissistic relationship is a form of deprogramming. There's another video coming out on that soon. and has to happen first, and only then can the healing really happen in earnest. It can take years, and your life may move on well in other areas, work, friends, but the doubt, the internal discomfort, the grief, it all can persist for a while. But when people try to tell you to get on with it, or they give you vanilla advice about managing a broken heart, or suggest that you go to a retreat or a massage or a spa day or a gratitude meditation, it can feel like one more invalidation. And then you may feel guilty because you know that some of these micromanagers, they actually did mean well, but they don't know how to do this. Healing is your path to walk. Get the supports and get the information you need, but don't put a clock on this process, and recognize that this process takes a minute. And you often never quite feel the same way again. Nobody, not me, not your shrink, your best friend, not your yoga teacher, no one can tell you how to do this. And the best anyone can do is to validate your experience and give you your space, as well as being there for you openly and non-judgmentally. And to all you micromanagers out there who may be watching this video, don't do it. You can get them the present to help them feel better, but don't say, this will turn it around. And absolutely don't say like, all right, let's just go and have a party and then you'll forget. Not going to forget. So do the kind things, but do them from a place of not trying to press the button on the fast forward on this healing process, but just let a person know, I'm here. I appreciate you. I got you. This will take as long as it takes. I'm here with you as you walk through this. I'll be there on the other side. That's what a person who's going through this and is healing from this needs. Thanks again.